Hunters have come up with a very clever way to catch small monkeys. They put, it'll fit. It'll all come together. They put peanuts inside of a gourd with a small hole. The hole is just big enough for a monkey's hand to get in there to get the peanuts. And then they tie the gourd to a tree. And when the hunters come back, they find that the monkeys have become trapped by their own unwillingness to let go of the peanuts. You see, at any time, they put their hands in. At any time, they could let go of the peanuts and pull their hands and be free. But they don't do it. Well, we're like that sometimes when we're holding on to our grudges and resentments. We sort of cling to them. We chain ourselves to them. And in the process, we create our own prison. At any time, we could let go of that and set ourselves free. Lewis Smedes has written many wonderful books about forgiveness, and he says, to forgive is to set a prisoner free and to realize the prisoner is you. Well, we know we're supposed to forgive. I mean, Jesus made this very clear when he said that we're supposed to forgive 70 times, 7 times, which pretty much means always and constantly, that we're really supposed to live in forgiveness moment to moment throughout our lives. But what we find typically is that when we go to forgive, there's something that gets in the way. And that something is our ego. The ego has quite a bit to say about forgiveness. The ego is what's going to say to you, hey, you deserve to be angry and upset about this. Don't you dare forgive that person. If you do, you'll be excusing it, you'll be condoning it, tolerating it, you may even be enabling it. Don't you dare let them off the hook. Well, let's just think about that for a moment. If we're filled with bitterness and resentment, who's really on the hook? We are. The other person has gone on to live their life. So we're the ones who are continuing to stew over it, to keep going over it again and again and again, losing our health and our happiness and our peace of mind over it. We're the ones suffering. We're the ones on the hook. Comedian Buddy Hackett once said, I never hold grudges because while I'm holding a grudge, they're out dancing. It's just kind of true, isn't it? Nevertheless, we often hold on to our pain or our resentment or our hurt, thinking that in some way, eventually, somehow, some way, that it's going to catch up to that other person and they're going to suffer or they're going to pay the price. Well, there's a Buddhist story about a man who was struck by an arrow that had been shot from an unknown assailant. But rather than tending to the wound, the man chose to not remove the arrow until the archer was found and punished. And so the wound began to fester and become infected. And eventually the poison from that wound killed him. So the question is, which is more responsible for that man's death? The archer's letting go or the victim's holding on? You see, sometimes we hold on to that arrow. We hold on to that wound and actually prevent it from healing. And in the process, the only person being hurt, the only life that's being lost, whether literally or figuratively, is ours. Now, I imagine there are some of you watching, some of you here today that are thinking, I get that, but I just can't forgive. What this person did was so wrong. They really should pay the price. Well, realize that there's a difference between accountability and forgiveness. You see, they're separate, and you can have both. Accountability is the consequences for our actions. We can hold other people accountable for the consequences of their actions. Forgiveness is about letting go of the effect that their actions is having on us. It's about letting go of the anger, the hurt, the resentment, the pain for our own health and well-being. So a good example would be if someone steals from us, Well, of course, they have to be held accountable for that. They have to answer to the law. But at the same time, we can forgive them and release the emotional charge that that has on us. Do you see how the two can exist simultaneously? And one does not preclude the other. Well, forgiveness is very, very deep, deep work. It's probably the most challenging spiritual work that we do. And so let me just say early on that if you have been the victim of trauma and abuse and really deep kind of sense of violation or injustice, I highly recommend seeing a professional counselor to walk you through that, to help you through your healing process. Because it's said that, this is Fred Luskin, he's a researcher, he says, forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. You got to give up hope for a better past because the past is past. You see, it doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't erase the hurt that you have felt. It just simply says, I've already suffered because of this. I've already been through this. I've carried this long enough. I do not want this to control my future. I'm ready to let it go. You know, sometimes we think that forgiveness is a weakness. The opposite is true. To forgive actually is an act of tremendous strength and resolve. Some of you may remember a little girl named Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges was the first African American child who was sent in to integrate in the South. And in 1960, the federal marshals would show up every day that she was coming to school to keep her protected. And as she would walk through the crowds, people would spit on her and just shout out the most terrible names. But Ruby, 5-year-old Ruby, she kept her composure. She walked into school every day. And people were so amazed. They were amazed that she was not more emotionally damaged by this experience. She didn't show any anger, any upset. Well, they found out later that every day, Ruby Bridges was praying for God to forgive her persecutors. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. A 5-year-old girl. So one of the biggest steps in the whole thing around forgiveness is simply deciding to forgive. It's like that something in you says, I'm tired of this. I am going to forgive. It's a very courageous decision. It requires a lot of commitment because you have to give up 3 things when you decide to forgive. And the first is being ruled by your ego. Because when you say you're going to forgive, you're saying, I am not going to be driven by pride, by retaliation, or the need to win. The second thing you have to give up when you're going to forgive someone is the story that you've made up about them and you. It's so easy to fall into this dualistic thinking. They're bad, I'm good. They're wrong, I'm right. They're evil, I am enlightened and spiritual. I am evolved, right? Come on. Every single one of us has both light in us and shadow. Every single one of us has hurt someone and been hurt. Every one of us has our blind spots. Every one of us makes mistakes. You got to let that go. And the third thing that you have to stop doing, the way you have to stop thinking when you're going to forgive, you have to stop telling yourself that you've got all the facts here, that you know everything there is to know about this person and this situation, because you don't. You don't and you never will. There's always more to the story than we know. There is always more to the story. You don't know what this person has been through. You don't know what they're going through now in their lives. You don't know what pain they've experienced. You don't know what challenges they're up against. You don't have any of that context, and you probably never will. But what you can know is that there is more to the story. And if you knew it, you would see things differently. You would see things differently because you don't have the full picture. So think about how different it would feel if, as you're going down the highway, somebody cuts you off, if you knew that that person was racing to get to the hospital because a relative was about to make their transition. Think about how different it is if a clerk is maybe a little abrupt with you, or you feel they're rude to you, but then you find out they just got a cancer diagnosis. Perhaps somebody isn't as warm and giving to you or as responsive to you as you would like. You find out later they're going through a divorce. You see, there's always more to the story. We can give people the benefit of a doubt just knowing that and create a little bit of space for compassion and forgiveness. So I've shared before I had challenges with my father when I was growing up. My dad had many wonderful traits. He was really smart. He was very funny and very successful in his career. But from my view as a child, my dad could also be a bully. And he tended to pick on me. And he had really become an expert at withdrawing love in order to get what he wanted. So, the master, I would say, of conditional love. And so I struggled with that, and I felt that pain through my childhood into my young adult years. And there were two things that really changed it for me and allowed me to forgive. And the first was working with a great therapist who really helped me dive right into it. What I had been avoiding exploring. No, we're going right into the thick of this. And to really surface all the pent-up feelings that I had, to move through them and to release them. And the second thing that helped me was being able to see my father as a fallible human being. Dad didn't have it all figured out, as was quite obvious. But as I got older and I began learning more about his upbringing, his childhood, things that had happened in his life, I started to see how he had experienced pain. I began to even just imagine ways in which he had felt others withholding love from him. And as a result, my heart opened. And I did feel compassion for him. And I was able to forgive and let it go, except for when I bring it up here at church. And that's just to make a point. But they say that you know that you've forgiven someone when they have harmless passage through your mind. Harmless passage, nice, smooth. Yes, I'm thinking of them. Isn't that nice? You don't get that reaction. You don't feel yourself tense up. You don't feel, once again, all those emotions that you have felt in the past. Instead, there's peace. And oh my gosh, I will tell you, I cannot even begin to tell you what a relief it was to let that burden go with my dad. So that at the end of his life, we were able to have a lovely relationship. You see, the choice is always there for you. And what I would ask today is, if you're wondering whether you should forgive someone or you're still kind of in this internal struggle, to ask yourself, have I had enough of this? Really? Have I had enough of this? Am I ready to let this go? Would I rather be right than happy? And then if you decide that you do want to move into a forgiveness process, here are some steps that may be of help. Lisa, first one. There we go. The first one is, hold a very high vision for yourself at the outset. And by the way, these steps, it's encouraged that you write all of this down. And just remember, nobody's going to see this but you, so be very honest. Hold a high vision for outcomes. In other words, why are you going into this forgiveness process? What is the very highest outcome that you're after for yourself? It could be inner peace. It could be joy. It could be opening to new relationships. Whatever it is, be specific, because later on, when the going gets tough, you can bring that back to mind to strengthen your resolve and say, am I willing to release this upset in order to experience more, whatever you've identified as your goal? Next, if as you think about forgiving someone, it just feels overwhelming, oh my gosh, where would I begin? There's so much there. Don't try to take it on all at once. Break it down into pieces. Break it down into specific incidents. Write them down. This is how I was hurt. This was what happened. Write them down and then select from that one to begin with. Just one incident. One that perhaps is a little bit smaller. It might be a little easier for you. Then once you have identified that particular incident, ask yourself, assess the debt. So in the Lord's Prayer, we sing, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. So the debt is what you feel is owed you. So as you think about this occurrence, this situation, what do you think that person owes you? What would you want them to say or do? Do Do you want an apology? Do you want retribution? Do you want them to take a certain action? Whatever it is, write it down. And remember, you can be just as blunt as you want to be because nobody is going to see this. Write it down. And then once you've identified what the debt is, ask yourself these 3 questions. What is your likelihood of getting it? Be honest. What is your likelihood that this person will actually honor this debt in the way that you are seeking? Second question, how long are you willing to wait? How long are you willing to wait? Put your life on hold while you're waiting. And the third, are you willing to let it go? Is it time? Is it time to let it go? Those questions, I think, are very crystallizing, and once you've worked with one incident, you can go back and come through with another one and continue to work the process. Next one, what's really important, take it one step at a time. Don't make this so big and so burdensome that you feel like you can't do it. Little pieces. And last, and I think perhaps most important, is to make sure you provide safety for yourself. It is so important if we've suffered a hurt to create a safe place for us to process and move through the pain. So create safety in whatever way works for you. It may be with a counselor. It may be by just using self-calming techniques so that when you feel your emotions starting to rise, you can practice a spiritual practice, prayer, meditation, walking in nature, listening to music, reading inspirational literature, whatever it might be to help you breathe and come back to center. This is such powerful work. And I think it's the most liberating work that we can do. Remember that giving forgiveness to someone else is really, as the song said, a gift you give yourself. And the benefits of that gift are your renewed health, your wholeness, and your freedom. I'll close with a story about forgiveness from a poet named Edwin Markham. And as Edwin was approaching his retirement years, he discovered that the man to whom he had entrusted his entire financial portfolio had squandered all of the money, all of it. And his dream, the Markham's dream of a comfortable retirement, vanished. And he began to brood over the injustice and the loss. The more he thought about it, the more it festered. The angrier it got. His anger just grew by leaps and bounds. It was really taking over his life. One day, while sitting at his table, Markham found himself drawing circles as he tried to soothe the turmoil that he felt within. Finally, he concluded, I must forgive him. I will forgive him. And then looking again at the circles he had drawn on the paper before him, Markham wrote these lines, and of all the hundreds of poems that he wrote, all of the many books of poetry that he published, these lines became the most popular and the most memorable. Drawing these circles, he wrote, he drew a circle to shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle to take him in. Let's turn now to our meditation. I invite you to get comfortable in your seat, breathing in deeply. Release, 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 and let go. Feeling yourself supported by the chair beneath you, your feet on Mother Earth. Take a moment to connect with the presence of God within you. Feeling that loving, beautiful sense of spirit. Take a moment to beam to yourself love, support, encouragement, and compassion. Breathing into the spaciousness of spirit, connecting with the heart of your hearts, the very center of your being. I invite you to bring into your mind anyone who does not currently have harmless passage through your consciousness. A place where there's a sticking point for you, an unhealed wound. Bringing that person into heart and mind. Take a moment to beam love and compassion to them while honoring the needs in you. I invite you to ask the question in your own heart. Am I willing to forgive? Am I willing to let go? Breathe into that question and listen for your answer in the silence. We feel gratitude moving in and through us. As we realize that whatever decision we make about whether to forgive, whether this is the time, whether we're ready, that Spirit is right there for us. As we make that decision, we will be shown the way. And for this, we are truly, truly grateful. Thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.